Once in a while, the blind squirrel does find the nut. And that is what happened last night on 60 Minutes. They did an outstanding piece on this new Texas college that is being called by some Disruptor U. It's known as the University of Austin, known as UATX, and the school is swapping DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for what they call MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence.
How dare you?
I know, you can't do that. You wait, what? You're going to judge people based on who they are as individuals? Based on how competent and capable they are of being in your university, not based on their skin color, their sexual orientation, their gender? Like, what? You can't, how? No. No.
There's something wrong with them.
Well, what is that all about? Well, they're doing it, and they're not apologizing for it, and in fact, they're promoting it. Because they noticed what we've talked about a lot and what everybody knows in this country, and there is a massive disconnect between the academic elite and the average American voter. And here is part of what was aired last night on 60 Minutes and how they talked with the university president about all the issues that academia faces today and how it also then permeates into broader society.
We came across some data that less than 3% of the Harvard faculty identifies as conservative, more than 75% identifies as liberal. Wildly out of proportion with the American public.
There's a huge disconnect now between the academic elite and the average American voter.
Ferguson says this political imbalance, plus social media, plus an army of campus administrators monitoring speech, equals a culture where, per one study, nearly 80% of today's students self-censor on campus for fear of being ostracized. Faculty feels the chill, too.
The president of a university I won't name once told me that he received, on average, 1 email a day from a member of the university community calling for somebody else to be fired for something they'd said. That reminds me vividly of the bad old days of Stalin's Soviet Union, and yet it's happening on American campuses.
The stakes are that high.
I think if a university system starts to go wrong, then something is bound to go wrong for the society as a whole. The ideas that start on campus pretty quickly spread to corporations, to media organizations. University forms the way you think about the world for the rest of your life. If our universities are screwed up, and I believe they are, then that will screw up America as a whole quite quickly.
It will, and you're actually seeing that right now. There is a huge disconnect when you look at the voting bloc of the American public between what you would call, and I use this term loosely, I'll put my air quotes up, just working class, regular people, and those who have multiple degrees from fill-in-the-blank woke college. It's why I've dubbed it the overeducated, woke, largely white crowd, OWW. I mean, they spend a career, it seems like, in academia, and they come out with these opinions and these thoughts and these ideas that are far from the mainstream, and then, if you don't agree with them, they call you every name in the book. So this campus, University of Austin, UATX as it's called, was conceived in 2021. And it was started by the guy you just heard from there, Niall Ferguson, and former New York Times journalist Bari Weiss. And they've gotten a lot of good funding. People like Bill Ackman, who is a high-profile donor to Donald Trump, former Democrat as well, Harvard graduate himself, who has been vocally critical of his own alma mater after the October 7th attacks by Hamas against Israel last year. You've seen, of course, these college campuses just spiral out of control during the winter into the spring, simping for Hamas, whether it was at Harvard, whether it was at Columbia, UCLA, or even they had that one over at KU. Now, the KU one was pretty weak, and overall, I thought the KU administration handled it pretty well. But I do believe these options are going to continue to grow in higher education. And I think you're going to see a very different world. The Hillsdale College model is going to continue to develop in different parts of the country. I think you've got a great, maybe not as prominent or not as well-known option at Benedictine, and we know what happened there, of course, in May with the Harrison Butker speech. You've got this university in Austin that is also much more open to free speech, different ideas. It doesn't mean you have to be a conservative to go to them. But I do believe that parents, many of us who spend a lot of time thinking about our kids' colleges and then also saving money for our kids' colleges, are no longer interested in spending tens of thousands of dollars to ship our kids off to indoctrination factories. Yeah, let me spend all this money I've saved, working 20 years for this kid to go to college, and the kid's going to come out, looking like a woke clown with a beard down to his knees and yelling on behalf of Hamas. What are we doing here? Parents are waking up, and I do think students are also waking up to this too. So here's more from 60 Minutes last night, and this college down in Texas that's only been around for 3 years, University of Austin, having no apologies for saying DEI is not a thing here.
As for admissions, UATX swaps DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for what some call MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence.
Gender, race, ethnicity, what is the factor of that in your admissions decisions?
We don't take any of that into consideration in admissions. The primary thing that we're interested in is the mind.
Meaning what?
The kind of capacity to think deeply, to answer questions, to challenge norms.
I got to tell you, we did not see a particularly diverse student body.
Oh. We are putting resources into finding talent of an intellectual variety. And if you're interested in diversity, I recommend you look at the social backgrounds of our students, at the family circumstances of our students.
High-profile UATX donors include Trump-backing billionaire Bill Ackman, a Harvard grad who vocally criticized his school after October 7th, and Harlan Crow, close friend of conservative Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Critics attack UATX as a right-wing university simply wearing the cloak of free speech.
Well, even if that was the case, okay, so there's one right-wing university compared to the hundreds of left-wing universities, which is basically all of them out there, especially if you're in the liberal arts school at any of these colleges. I love how the 60 Minutes anchor tries to be like, I didn't see a lot of diversity on this campus. See, if all you see in somebody is their skin color, then yes, you would not see a lot of air quotes diversity. But believe it or not, people are more than their skin color. I know that's news to 60 Minutes. I know that's news to many in legacy media because it's about how you look. It's not about who you are. It's not about your life history, your world story. It's not about any of that. It's just about, I don't see enough blacks or Indians or Asians around here, John, so we got a problem on our hands.
I'm interested in getting a free speech cloak. I'm hoping they come in 2X. They're a little heavier nowadays. I want to wear it outerwear. Cloaking yourself at free speech.
Oh, I know. It's still, listen, it's still going to be 60 Minutes. They're still going to put their spin on it.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll give them credit for at least covering the story and doing something on it, even with their silly spin.
Sure.
But you're right. It is more about, as they say, the social backgrounds of the individuals. Because we all have our own story. Just because two people are white doesn't mean they have the same lived experience.
Talk about a bombshell.
I know, that's a shocker to the DEI crowd that has been grifting off of corporate America and academia for years now. But to normal people, when you talk to them, you don't be like, we must have a lot in common because we're white. It's like, what? No. I told you yesterday. I took Claire to the birthday party that she was at yesterday, and I was talking to a guy about birthing goats. Guess what? We were both white, and you know what I've never done before? Birth a goat. And I have no plans to after hearing the stories.
Right. We're going to leave that for him.
Yeah. So it's like, man, we are all different. We're all unique. We all have stories that we can share with each other that have completely different life experiences, backgrounds, insights, and the skin color be damned.
Hey, the Wonder Bread's fresh today, Pete. Have you had any?
Oh, they just can't help themselves, though. This is a great example, and I am so hopeful that more colleges like this will be popping up in the next 5, 10, 15 years. You know, my kids are young, obviously, 5, soon to be 6, 3, and 8 months. And if there are more University of Austins out there, and it's just ironic that it's also in Austin, this, deep blue city in red Texas, I'm fine with it, though. I am here for it because these are the kind of options we need. Because also, if nothing else, it'll get these other institutions to wake up a little bit.
Necessity is the mother of invention there in Austin, right?
You ain't kidding. 913-408-7957, especially if you're someone who's got kids approaching that college age. Knowing what we now know, and we've always known that the higher education institutions have leaned left, but they've gotten worse. They have no intentions, it seems like, of getting better. So what do you do? 60 Minutes last night had this piece that was just outstanding. And it was on the University of Austin and how they are building a college, not University of Texas at Austin. Brand new college, University of Austin, showing that they are embracing a culture that is really, it's not about it being like a right-wing culture. It's just a culture that is based around this idea of embracing free speech, not having to be fearful of sharing your beliefs, which is what college used to be all about. That was the whole premise of like going to college, right? To kind of learn how to think and meet people that maybe didn't have the same background in life as you. And now it's just become largely left-wing echo chambers. So this college has been around for 3 years. 60 Minutes led its broadcast with it last night. Good for them. They still had their spin on it, but they did a good job. And I asked you before the break, and I got a bunch of texts here I want to go through. Just, hey, if you're a parent or if you're a grandparent and you're maybe involved in your child or grandchild's higher education, like, where do you want that money to go? Do you fear that it goes to some university that turns them into a crackpot? Because that's out there. On the text line, 913-408-7957, Pete, my nephew's going to Missouri Western. He said that the taxpayer should pay for college tuition, liberating money from me and paying him to go to college. Well, it's that kind of stuff. It's like the student loan bailout stuff, right? They clearly should all be forced to take Economics 101. And they can use an example of the last couple of years to showcase how that will completely fail them. If you just dump money into the system, and if the taxpayer just ends up paying for everybody's college tuition, what do you think happens to the cost of college? It will continue to go up because the colleges will not be on the hook for anything. I mean, that's what you've seen over the last generation. You saw the government start to back some of these student loans, right? No questions asked. The colleges get their money. You can't default on these loans. What happens then? The cost of tuition continues to blast beyond the rate of inflation. That's what's happened for 50 years at the college level. And it's gotten worse since the government's gotten involved in student loans. Use the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan, all those things that happened in 2021 under Joe Biden that helped spike inflation. What happened? You had this massive supply of free money that was printed all over the country. People just got their handouts, they got their money, and there were no questions asked. And then on the back end, what happened? They cut off supply. People were not going back to work. They were living off of these government checks that were being passed out. So they increased supply of money, and they increased the demand for product by increasing the supply of money while not increasing the supply of goods and services that were being provided because people stayed out of the workforce. That's how you spike inflation. You increase demand because you increase the supply of funny money without increasing the supply of the goods and services, and then all of a sudden everything's costing an arm and a leg. We just lived through it the last 2 years. We just experienced it the last 2-3 years. It's not an academic study anymore, although it could be that as well. And hopefully people learn their lesson from it. But that text right there, compared to all the others, stood out to me above the rest. Also on the text line, Pete, please try to avoid the phrase, every college is liberal. Not all of us are. Well, Who's us? I need to know who you are on the text line. I don't know who us is. I get it, too. Within every university, the arts and sciences are going to be more liberal than the business schools, than the engineering schools. That was my experience at Villanova. You had a lot more liberal people getting their arts degrees than you had people getting their finance, accounting, nursing, and mechanical engineering degrees. I understand all of that. That's absolutely true. But still, you know which way, especially leadership in these universities operate, and which side of the aisle they will be more accepting of. That is largely indisputable. And that's where you've got a problem at the very top in these colleges, from the presidents oftentimes to the boards to the professors themselves, and then that can filter down to the students. So I don't deny, we saw last week at KU during the basketball game, you saw kids doing the YMCA Trump dance during one of the timeouts. I never thought I'd see that in a million years. I figured hell would freeze over first. We saw that last week. So I'm not saying they're not out there. KU last week was a prime example at the basketball game. But we all understand that, largely speaking, academia shifts you towards one political party. And that is why the government embraces forcing people into these four-year colleges. They can turn them into their own little group of voters. And it will take a long time for some people to wake up and see the light. Hopefully they will, but it will take some time for them to see the light.